Welcome to InfoStream, your daily current. Unsure what to listen to? Turn to us for today's headlines. Stay informed. Trump imposes tariffs on Iran. The U.S. is increasing trade restrictions against Iran. IC operations face legal battles. Legal challenges are ongoing regarding IC operations. Democrats prioritize economic strategy. The Democratic Party is focusing on economic issues. Trump hosts Venezuelan leader Machado. The U.S. is shifting its strategy with a meeting involving Machado. BBC challenges Trump's defamation lawsuit. The BBC is fighting the lawsuit with a motion to dismiss. Kelly sues Hegseth over retirement rank. Senator Kelly is suing Hegseth over pay reduction. X under scrutiny for AI deepfakes. Regulatory concerns surround X's Grok AI. Ukraine civilian deaths reach record high. The number of civilian casualties in Ukraine is rising. Myanmar genocide case progresses at ICC. The International Court is examining the genocide case in Myanmar. U.S. seizes tanker in Scottish waters. The U.S. government has taken control of a tanker in Scotland. Mali faces crisis with Niger's response. A blockade in Mali is escalating the crisis in Niger. Navy investigates device linked to Havana syndrome. The Pentagon is investigating a device related to the Havana syndrome. Trump administration uses Justice Department for political gain. The administration is using the Justice Department to exert influence. Democrats express concerns about democratic values and fundraising. There are growing concerns about the state of democratic values and fundraising strategies. Trump announces 25% tariffs on trade with Iran amid protests. President Donald Trump has declared immediate 25% tariffs on all trade between the United States and Iran, framing it as a final and conclusive order. This action follows weeks of widespread protests within Iran, fueled by economic hardship and government repression. The announcement lacks specific details regarding implementation, leaving the scope of the tariffs uncertain. It's unclear whether the tariffs will apply to all trade partners or solely to Iran's largest export destinations. Significant trade flows are already established between Iran and several nations. China is Iran's dominant export partner, purchasing over $14 billion worth of goods in the year to October 2025, primarily fueled by Iranian fuel exports. Iraq represents the second largest trade partner, with $10.5 billion in imports. The United Arab Emirates and Turkey also feature prominently, with jumps in trade volumes. Iran's major imports include food, particularly corn, rice, sunflower seeds, and oils and gold, which accounted for $6.7 billion in imports. The potential impact on U.S.-China relations is significant. While existing tariffs on Chinese goods already average 30.8%, the introduction of a further 25% tariff could escalate tensions, given China's dominance in rare earth element supply, a critical component for U.S. technology. China has previously responded to U.S. trade actions by imposing its own tariffs and restricting rare earth exports. Iran's economy is severely strained by years of mismanagement, sanctions, and declining oil sales. The nation's vast oil reserves are not translating into economic prosperity, with a struggling population facing high inflation, rising living costs, and restricted opportunities for women. The economic crisis is a key driver of the ongoing protests. The legal challenge to the tariffs, currently subject to Supreme Court review, remains a critical factor. Trump has warned that failure to uphold the tariffs would screw the U.S. The situation is complex, with significant implications for global trade and the stability of Iran. ICE operations in Minneapolis, legal challenges and ongoing concerns. Here recent developments surrounding the death of Renee Nicole Good, fatally shot by an ICE agent in Minneapolis, have triggered significant legal challenges and amplified existing concerns about federal immigration enforcement tactics. Multiple lawsuits have been filed by Minnesota and Illinois, alleging unlawful and excessive force, constitutional violations, and a pattern of intimidation tactics employed by Department of Homeland Security, DHS agents. These suits highlight a dramatic escalation in federal immigration operations, characterized by unprecedented size, intensity, and deployment to sensitive public locations. The core of the legal action centers on the circumstances surrounding Good's death, with critics arguing that the agent's use of deadly force was disproportionate and unjustified. The state's lawsuits question the justification for deploying large numbers of armed, masked agents, including those operating in schools and hospitals, and demand an immediate halt to these operations. Furthermore, the legal challenges underscore a broader pattern of alleged misconduct, including instances of racial profiling and unwarranted detentions of individuals based solely on their perceived national origin. These accusations contribute to a climate of fear and distrust within the Minneapolis and St. Paul communities. Adding to the legal pressure, CNN's Jake Tapper directly questioned DHS Secretary Kristi Noem regarding the justification for the agent's actions. specifically inquiring about whether similar deadly force would have been deemed appropriate in response to individuals involved in the January 6 Capitol attack. The ongoing federal deployment, expected to increase to approximately 1,000 additional Border Patrol agents in Minneapolis, further intensifies the legal and political ramifications. The states contend that this continued presence represents a sustained intrusion and a disregard for local safety and constitutional rights. The legal battles are expected to continue, with significant implications for immigration enforcement policies and practices nationwide. Economic focus emerges as key for Democratic strategy. Recent news articles highlight a growing emphasis within the Democratic Party on addressing economic concerns, particularly affordability, as a central strategy for upcoming elections. Senator Elizabeth Warren has advocated for a shift in focus, urging the party to directly address the financial struggles of American workers and demonstrate a willingness to challenge powerful interests. Warren's call for a big tent approach seeks to rebuild trust among voters by acknowledging economic challenges and proposing concrete solutions. The articles detail Warren's push for congressional action on credit card interest rates and housing affordability, mirroring her long-standing efforts to regulate financial institutions and protect consumers. This strategy is intended to resonate with a broader electorate, particularly working-class voters who have expressed significant economic anxieties. Furthermore, the articles discuss a broader Democratic effort to prioritize economic issues in off-year elections, referencing successful campaigns in New Jersey, Virginia, and New York City, where candidates successfully framed affordability as a core concern. This shift reflects a recognition of the urgency of the economic situation and the potential for Democrats to capitalize on voter frustration. Senior figures within the Democratic Party, including billionaire donor Reid Hoffman, have acknowledged the need for a more direct economic message, albeit with differing approaches. Hoffman, for instance, suggested that Warren's focus on regulation might be too narrow, advocating for a broader coalition to defeat Donald Trump. Senator Warren's strategy is aimed at laying the groundwork for future Democratic campaigns, emphasizing a commitment to addressing economic challenges and building a sustainable political base. The articles suggest a significant shift in the party's approach, prioritizing economic issues as a cornerstone of its electoral strategy. This reflects a strategic realignment, aiming to connect with voters' immediate concerns and build momentum for future elections. Trump to host Venezuelan opposition leader Machado amidst shifting U.S. strategy. Recent news highlights a series of developments surrounding the U.S. approach to Venezuela, primarily centered around a meeting between President Donald Trump and Venezuelan opposition leader Maria Corina Machado, scheduled for Thursday. The visit follows a military operation in Caracas that led to the capture of Venezuelan President Nicolas Maduro and the subsequent swearing-in of his vice president, Delcy Rodriguez, as the country's acting president. Trump has expressed reservations about Machado's leadership, stating she lacks the support and respect of the Venezuelan people, a sentiment echoed in earlier comments. Despite this, Trump has shown an interest in Machado's Nobel Peace Prize, a prize he has long sought. He acknowledged her desire to offer the award to him, though the Nobel Committee clarified that the prize is not transferable. Following the military action, Trump announced the cancellation of a planned second wave of attacks, citing Venezuela's cooperation and the release of political prisoners. He now describes Rodriguez as an ally and has indicated a willingness to meet with her at some point. However, the U.S. government remains uncertain about the whereabouts of 137 Venezuelans deported under the Alien Enemies Act, a wartime authority used by the Trump administration. Secretary of State Marco Rubio stated the government does not know their location and believes attempting to provide due process would harm U.S. foreign policy interests. These migrants were deported to El Salvador under this act. Furthermore, Trump's strategy of running Venezuela appears to be evolving. While he initially advocated for direct control, he now emphasizes cooperation with Rodriguez's leadership, anticipating a potentially long-term arrangement. Despite this shift, significant challenges remain, including concerns about Venezuela's stability and skepticism from major oil companies regarding investment opportunities. Trump's plan for a large-scale drilling campaign has not garnered firm commitments from industry leaders. The situation underscores a complex and uncertain future for the U.S.-Venezuela relationship. BBC to fight Trump's defamation lawsuit with motion to dismiss. The BBC is preparing to vigorously defend itself against Donald Trump's multi-billion-dollar defamation lawsuit, announcing its intention to file a motion to dismiss the case. Both the BBC and CNN have reported on the broadcaster's strategy, outlining the legal arguments it intends to present to the Florida court. The core of Trump's claim revolves around a 15-second clip from the BBC's Panorama documentary, Trump: A Second Chance, which spliced together two segments of Trump's January 6, 2021 speech. The edit, featuring Trump's phrases, "We're gonna walk down to the Capitol," and we fight like hell," was interpreted by Trump as an incitement to violence. The BBC's defense centers on several key arguments. Firstly, it contends that the Florida court lacks personal jurisdiction over the corporation. Secondly, it argues that the documentary was never aired in the United States, and therefore could not have defamed Trump. The BBC also asserts that Trump has failed to demonstrate that the program caused him any actual injury, and that he cannot plausibly allege the documentary was published with actual malice, a legal standard required for public figures in defamation lawsuits. The BBC's motion will specifically address the documentary's content, highlighting that the edited clip was taken out of context, and that the overall program provided balanced coverage of Trump's path to re-election. Internal BBC memos leaked in November, following the edit, contributed to the resignations of the corporation's Director General and Head of News. The BBC is requesting a stay on all discovery proceedings pending the outcome of the motion. Legal experts have characterized Trump's lawsuit as weak, despite the BBC's initial apology and admission of an error in judgment. The BBC spokesperson reiterated its commitment to defending the case, stating that it will not provide further comment on ongoing legal proceedings. The anticipated trial date in 2027 remains a possibility if the motion to dismiss is unsuccessful. Senator Mark Kelly has filed a lawsuit against Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth, alleging retaliation and a violation of his rights, following Kelly's video urging service members not to obey unlawful orders issued by the Trump administration. The lawsuit centers on Hegseth's attempt to reduce Kelly's retirement rank and pay, arguing it constitutes unlawful punishment for protected speech and an abuse of power. Kelly contends the action represents an attempt to chill legislative oversight and create a chilling effect on criticism of the executive branch's use of the armed forces. The core of the dispute stems from Kelly's November video, which, alongside 5 other lawmakers with military backgrounds, advised service members to refuse orders deemed illegal. Hegseth responded by initiating proceedings to determine Kelly's retirement grade and issuing a censure letter, characterizing Kelly's actions as seditious and detrimental to unit cohesion. Legal experts, including Rachel Van Landingham, a former Air Force judge advocate, argue that Kelly's actions align with the established immunity afforded to legislative acts, and that any attempt to penalize him post-retirement is legally untenable. The lawsuit highlights a broader tension between the executive and legislative branches, particularly concerning the role of elected officials in advising and scrutinizing military operations. It underscores the potential for abuse of power and the importance of safeguarding freedom of speech, even when it challenges the direction of government policy. The situation has been characterized by escalating rhetoric, including a reported in-person confrontation between Kelly and Hegseth during a classified briefing. Kelly maintains that Hegseth is targeting his earned military service, creating a climate of fear for retired veterans. Legal analysis suggests that Kelly's actions are consistent with the duties of a sitting senator who is responsible for understanding and questioning the laws and policies that govern the military. The legal battle will likely focus on interpreting the Uniform Code of Military Justice and determining whether Kelly's actions constitute a legitimate exercise of his constitutional rights. The case raises significant concerns about the separation of powers and the potential for political interference in military affairs. X faces regulatory scrutiny over Grok AI deepfake concerns. A Northern Ireland politician, Cara Hunter, has quit X, formerly Twitter, due to growing concerns about the platform's AI tool Grok and its potential for generating non-consensual intimate imagery. This follows a deepfake video targeting Hunter 4 years prior. The UK government is enacting a new law to criminalize the creation and distribution of non-consensual intimate images, including those generated by AI. Ofcom, the UK's online safety regulator, is launching a formal investigation into X to determine if the platform has adequately addressed the issue of illegal content generated by Grok. The investigation will focus on X response time to reported illegal content and whether the platform has taken sufficient steps to prevent its users from accessing it. Ofcom has set a firm deadline of Friday, January 9th, for X to provide a detailed explanation of its compliance efforts. Failure to comply could result in fines of up to 18 million or 10% of X worldwide revenue. Technology Secretary Liz Kendall emphasized that the government's actions are not intended to restrict freedom of speech, but to combat violence against women and girls. She highlighted that the new legislation will target companies supplying tools used to create these images, addressing the problem at its source. The government is also planning to introduce measures within the crime and policing bill to criminalize notification apps, further broadening the scope of regulation. The backlash against Grok has been global, with Malaysia and Indonesia temporarily blocking access to the AI tool, following similar concerns. Elon Musk has criticized the British government's actions, accusing them of seeking any excuse for censorship. However, Kendall countered that the focus is on protecting vulnerable individuals. Legal experts note that the investigation's outcome will have significant implications for social media platforms and their use of AI. The investigation's timeline remains uncertain, but Ofcom has prioritized the case. The new legislation represents a significant shift in regulatory oversight of online content and raises broader questions about the responsibilities of tech companies in preventing the misuse of AI. The case is expected to set a precedent for future regulation of AI-generated content. Ukraine civilian casualties reach record high in 2025. The United Nations reports a catastrophic surge in civilian casualties within Ukraine during 2025, marking the deadliest year since Russia's full-scale invasion began in 2022. A total of 214 civilians were killed and 142 injured due to conflict-related violence, overwhelmingly stemming from Russian attacks targeting Ukrainian-held areas. This represents a 31% increase in casualties compared to 2024 and a staggering 70% rise over 2023. The escalating violence is largely attributed to Russia's intensified aerial bombardment campaign, particularly targeting civilian infrastructure and energy systems. A single devastating attack on multiple Ukrainian cities last week involved the launch of 242 drones, 14 ballistic missiles, and 22 cruise missiles in a single night, leaving hundreds of thousands without power and heating. A particularly tragic incident occurred in the western city of Ternopil on November 19, where 38 civilians, including 8 children, were killed and 99, including 17 children, were injured. Numerous families suffered devastating losses, with some losing multiple members. The UN's Human Rights Monitoring Mission in Ukraine highlights the expanded use of long-range weapons as a key driver of the increased casualties, exposing civilians across the country to heightened risk. While the UN acknowledges that the actual figures are likely higher due to pending reports and limited access to occupied territories, the confirmed data paints a grim picture of the ongoing conflict's impact on Ukrainian civilians. Since February 2022, a total of 14,900 civilians have been confirmed killed, a number the UN believes is conservative. The situation remains critical, with ongoing attacks continuing to pose a significant threat to the safety and well-being of Ukrainian residents. The UN continues to monitor the situation and advocate for measures to protect civilians and hold perpetrators accountable for war crimes. The data underscores the urgent need for a lasting resolution to the conflict and the protection of vulnerable populations. Myanmar genocide case heats up at International Court. The International Court of Justice, ICJ, is currently presiding over a landmark case brought by the Gambia against Myanmar, accusing the nation of deliberately attempting to destroy the Rohingya Muslim minority through genocidal policies. Gambia's foreign minister, Dawda Jallow, presented evidence of credible reports of the most brutal and vicious violations inflicted upon the Rohingya, stemming from decades of persecution, dehumanizing propaganda, and culminating in a 2017 military crackdown. Over 700,000 Rohingya fled to Bangladesh during this period, and thousands were killed. A 2018 UN report called for investigations into top Myanmar military figures for potential genocide and crimes against humanity. Myanmar has consistently denied these allegations, claiming its operations targeted militant threats. The ICJ hearings, expected to conclude at the end of the month, will include testimony from Rohingya survivors, though these sessions are closed to the public and media. While the ICJ cannot prosecute individuals directly, its rulings carry significant weight internationally. Jallow argued that the case was driven by a sense of responsibility, following Gambia's own experience with a military government, highlighting Myanmar's ongoing cycle of atrocities and impunity, exemplified by the 2021 coup and the subsequent arrest of Aung San Suu Kyi. Suu Kyi's international reputation has been severely damaged by her defense of the army's actions. More than 1 million Rohingya currently reside in refugee camps in Bangladesh's Cox's Bazar region, while others have undertaken perilous journeys to countries like Malaysia and Indonesia. Rohingya survivors, including Marinera and Salma, expressed their hopes for justice and an end to their refugee status. The ICJ's deliberations are crucial in addressing this ongoing humanitarian crisis and holding accountable those responsible for alleged crimes against the Rohingya people. The final decision is anticipated to take several months, if not years, to reach. U.S. seizes oil tanker Marinera in Scottish waters. A U.S.-seized oil tanker, formerly known as the Bella 1, has been sighted in the Moray Firth of Scotland. sparking continued scrutiny of the vessel's operations. The U.S. Coast Guard, in conjunction with British Armed Forces, initially intercepted the Marinera in the North Atlantic last week, accusing it of violating international sanctions by transporting oil destined for Venezuela, Russia, and Iran. This seizure represents a significant escalation in the ongoing efforts to enforce sanctions against these nations. The Marinera's location within the Moray Firth, a geographically protected area of coastline, has drawn immediate attention. Images released on Tuesday reveal the tanker, alongside U.S. Coast Guard vessels and tugboats, indicating a sustained U.S. presence. The operation, conducted south of Iceland, involved a coordinated effort highlighting the determination of the United States to prevent illicit trade. The accusations against the Marinera center on its suspected role in circumventing economic sanctions imposed on Venezuela, Russia, and Iran. These sanctions aim to limit the revenue streams of these countries, primarily targeting their energy sectors. The U.S. government contends that the tanker's cargo was not for legitimate commercial purposes, but rather for the benefit of regimes under international sanctions. The boarding operation underscores the global reach of U.S. sanctions enforcement and the willingness to pursue vessels suspected of violating these regulations. The presence of the Marinera in Scottish waters necessitates further investigation and raises questions about the vessel's itinerary and the nature of its cargo. Authorities are expected to continue monitoring the situation closely as they work to determine the full extent of the alleged violations. The incident highlights the complexities of maritime security and the challenges of combating illicit trade in international waters. Mali's jihadist blockade Niger's response and escalating crisis. Niger has taken decisive action against dozens of transport operators and drivers who refuse to deliver fuel to Mali, effectively responding to the ongoing jihadist blockade crippling the Malian economy. Mali has been struggling for months with a blockade imposed by al-Qaeda-affiliated militant groups, primarily Jamaat Nusrat al-Islam wal Muslimin, JNM, which began with attacks on fuel tankers and escalated into broader economic warfare. This blockade has significantly disrupted fuel imports, a critical need for the landlocked Mali, particularly its vast northern desert region where JNM operates. In July, Niger and Mali signed an agreement for Niger to supply 85 million liters of fuel over 6 months, but this plan was immediately jeopardized when drivers and transport operators rejected the deliveries, fearing attacks. The 400 km journey from Niger to Mali, even with military escort, has proven perilous, with convoys repeatedly targeted by JMM fighters who have engaged in kidnapping and arson. In response to this refusal, Niger's transport ministry revoked the licenses of 14 transport operators and 19 drivers, along with a 1-year suspension for another operator, demanding the surrender of their transport documents and licenses. The situation has exacerbated existing challenges, leading to temporary closures of schools and universities due to severe fuel scarcity. The crisis has drawn international concern, with the U.S. urging Americans to avoid travel to Mali and France advising its citizens to leave. Niger's military government, led by Gen Assimi Gobanta, who seized power in 2020, is attempting to combat the insurgency, despite the presence of Russian mercenaries and the ongoing control of large parts of the country by militant groups. The blockade highlights the complex security situation in the region and the significant obstacles to economic stability in Mali. The situation underscores the fragility of the region's security and the difficulties in addressing long-standing conflicts. Former Navy sailor sentenced for espionage against China Jin Chao-wei, a 25-year-old former Navy sailor, was sentenced to 200 months, more than 16 years, in prison following his conviction on 6 espionage-related charges. The sentencing, handed down by a federal judge in San Diego, stemmed from his sale of sensitive military information to an intelligence officer working for China. Wei was paid over $12,000 for providing technical and operating manuals pertaining to U.S. Navy ships, including the amphibious assault ship USS Essex. The case arose from an investigation launched in August 2023 involving Wei and another California-based sailor, Wenheng Zhao. Zhao was previously sentenced to over 2 years after pleading guilty to conspiracy and receiving a bribe in violation of his official duties. The investigation highlighted a persistent concern among U.S. officials regarding China's espionage activities, which have resulted in numerous criminal cases targeting Chinese intelligence operatives involved in stealing sensitive government and commercial data, often through illegal hacking. Wei's recruitment occurred via social media in 2022, with the intelligence officer portraying himself as a naval enthusiast affiliated with the China Shipbuilding Industry Corporation. Despite a friend's warning about the individual's suspicious behavior, Wei continued communicating with him, even moving conversations to a more secure, encrypted messaging app. Over 18 months, he shared photos and videos of the USS Essex, provided information on the location of other Navy ships, and detailed the ship's defensive weapons. He ultimately provided 60 technical and operating manuals, including those for weapons control aircraft and deck elevators, which contained export control warnings and detailed the operations of multiple systems. Wei's rank was Petty Officer Second Class. The USS Essex is capable of transporting and supporting a Marine Corps landing force of over 2,000 troops. In a letter to the judge, Wei expressed remorse, attributing his actions to introversion and loneliness. The case underscores the ongoing threat of espionage and the importance of safeguarding sensitive military information. Pentagon acquires device linked to Havana syndrome investigation. The Department of Defense has purchased a device through Homeland Security investigations. EHSI, as part of an ongoing effort to understand the causes of anomalous health episodes, commonly known as Havana syndrome. The acquisition, costing an estimated 8 figures, occurred in the waning days of the Biden administration and involves a device that produces pulsed radio waves. HSI, a division of the Department of Homeland Security, made the purchase utilizing Defense Department funding. The device, originating from potentially Russian components, has become a focal point in the investigation, which began in late 2016 when U.S. diplomats in Havana reported symptoms mirroring head trauma, including vertigo and severe headaches. The investigation has expanded globally, with similar incidents reported involving U.S. troops and diplomats. Despite years of research, the intelligence community has been unable to definitively attribute the syndrome to a foreign adversary, though an intelligence panel in 2022 suggested pulsed electromagnetic energy as a plausible cause. Recent assessments, as of January 2025, remain skeptical of a deliberate campaign by a foreign nation, although analysts acknowledge the possibility in a small number of cases. HSI's collaboration with the Defense Department is significant, particularly concerning the investigation of U.S.-controlled technology overseas. This collaboration is frequently utilized when the military encounters U.S. technology in regions like Afghanistan and Iraq. The acquisition of the device has reignited controversy, with victims arguing the U.S. government has dismissed their concerns and potentially suppressed crucial evidence suggesting Russian involvement. Some former and current CIA officers have voiced concerns about the agency's handling of the investigation. The investigation faces challenges due to the lack of a clear definition of anomalous health incidents and the difficulty of conducting post-symptom testing. The potential proliferation of this technology is also a growing concern. Victims, including some who have been forced into early retirement due to their symptoms, view the device's acquisition as a potential vindication of their claims. The ongoing investigation continues to be a contentious issue, with the U.S. government grappling to understand the nature of these unexplained health episodes and address the concerns of those affected. Trump administration intensifies use of Justice Department for political leverage. The Trump administration is escalating its efforts to utilize the Justice Department for political purposes, marked by a series of concerning developments, including investigations into Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell and the creation of a new Assistant Attorney General directly reporting to the White House. These actions signal a significant departure from established norms and raise serious questions about the independence of the Justice Department. The investigation into Powell, initiated despite no criminal charges being filed, follows months of public criticism from Trump regarding Powell's monetary policy decisions, specifically his perceived reluctance to lower interest rates. This investigation, prompted by renovations at the Federal Reserve headquarters, is viewed by many Republicans as a direct attempt to influence Powell's actions. The probe's potential impact on the Federal Reserve's independence is a major concern. Alongside the Powell investigation, the administration established a new Assistant Attorney General role focused on fraud, ostensibly linked to a fraud scandal in Minnesota. This Assistant Attorney General will operate directly from the White House under the supervision of Vice President J.D. Vance and President Trump. This unprecedented arrangement formalizes a breakdown in the separation between the White House and the Justice Department's investigative activities, a critical safeguard established after Watergate. Previously, Trump had publicly requested the prosecution of individuals like former FBI Director James Comey and New York Attorney General Letitia James. This new structure, however, represents a more direct and formalized attempt to exert influence over the Justice Department's actions. Republican lawmakers have voiced strong skepticism, with Senator Tom Tillis connecting the Powell investigation to an effort to undermine the Federal Reserve's independence, while others, including Senator Lisa Murkowski and Representative Don Bacon, have labeled it a political ploy. Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent has also expressed his unhappiness with the investigation. The creation of this new Assistant Attorney General coupled with the Powell investigation, highlights a concerning trend: the administration's willingness to utilize the Justice Department for political gain, potentially jeopardizing the integrity of the legal system. The situation underscores a significant shift in the relationship between the executive and judicial branches of government. Growing Democratic concerns over erosion of democratic values and fundraising strategies. Recent statements from prominent Democratic figures, Senator Chris Murphy and Senator Elizabeth Warren, highlight escalating anxieties within the party regarding the state of American democracy and the increasingly problematic reliance on billionaire donations. Senator Murphy, in a CNN interview, delivered a stark assessment, declaring that he is watching the disintegration of our democracy, reflecting a deep-seated concern about rising political polarization, threats to democratic institutions, and the perceived lack of robust defense against these challenges. Murphy's comments suggest a belief that fundamental democratic principles are under serious assault, demanding immediate and decisive action. Simultaneously, Senator Warren has issued a forceful warning to her fellow Democrats, urging them to cease prioritizing the appeasement of wealthy billionaire donors. Warren argues that the pursuit of large contributions is not only ethically questionable, but also detrimental to the party's broader goals. She contends that focusing on securing funds from individuals with immense wealth distracts from engaging with grassroots movements and addressing the concerns of ordinary Americans. Warren's argument centers on the idea that the party's reliance on billionaire donations creates a dynamic where policy decisions are unduly influenced by the interests of a select few, rather than reflecting the will of the majority. She advocates for a shift in strategy, emphasizing direct engagement with communities and a commitment to policies that benefit all citizens, not just those capable of making substantial financial contributions. The combined concerns voiced by Murphy and Warren represent a significant internal debate within the Democratic Party, signaling a desire to reevaluate both the external threats to democracy and the methods used to secure political support.